Welcome to the podcast series, Us and Them, brought to you by Heidelberg University's Graduate School for Humanities and Social Sciences. Tune in for thought-provoking interviews with experts in different fields, from the social sciences to the humanities, from law to economics. Welcome to the HGGS podcast series, Us and Them. Today we have Isabell Eiwan from the Faculty of Law, Heidelberg University, in our studio. Welcome, Isabell.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me, I guess.
Wonderful introduction. Today, with Isabell, we are going to concentrate on her topic, determination of criminal responsibility, the usability of AI in criminal proceedings and implications on human rights. Isabell was also a participant of Marsilius-Kolleg Summer School 2025, titled AI and Human Values. So it's a really interesting topic, Isabell, but let's start with actually elaborating more on your academic background and also what was your motivation that made you concentrate on this intersection point between AI and criminal responsibility, a topic from the criminal law.
Okay, I'll start with the academics. I used to study law at the University of Passau, which also allowed me to do both my bachelor's in common law of England and Wales and also the licence en droit in French law. After that, I transferred here and recently graduated with the first state exam. And parallel to that, I also started the Certificate of Advanced Studies in Cognitive Science. And that is mostly how I was introduced into the more theoretical aspects of AI through, for example, a discussion of Turing or Searle or also Noam Chomsky. And that's how I got into AI and also the question of AI in criminal law that just kind of came naturally because in an essay I discussed the Turing machine and Searle's Chinese room experiment. And I was wondering if in criminal law, the computer fraud, there's one approach to assume that you exchange the machine that is kind of like duped to do something. If we replace it with a human and if that person would also have been duped. And yeah, so that kind of opened up for me the comparability or the comparison between Chinese room and Turing experiment and the criminal law in that sector, like the thought experiment, if we exchange machines for humans, and what are actually the traits that we afford both, and how do we know what is behind it?
Well, thank you for the introduction. And also, maybe let's focus on the term criminal responsibility. And you also defined this term as innate human faculty to be responsible and consequently held responsible by a court of law for criminal acts and or outcomes. Maybe a person who is not coming from a legal background or legal scholarship may ask to elaborate you on this definition, because there are many different terms here like innate human faculty, responsibility, and also court of law, criminal acts. Maybe could you explain us what should we understand from this term criminal responsibility in the context of criminal law?
Okay. Well, innate usually just means you're born with it. In that case, we maybe have to adapt that we are born with the faculty, but you also develop it since you're like irresponsible until the age of 14 and then partially responsibility until the age of 18 or 21. And then you're fully responsible. But it basically just means if you infringe a criminal law, then you're probably going to be charged with it and the court is going to sentence you according to what you did, what was your state of mind in that moment, and yeah, were you in a physical or mental state to be held responsible? I know that's kind of circular right now, but
every definition is circular. Yeah. Actually, according to the linguistic theory, to some scholars, maybe at least.
And I have to agree with that.
Talking about this term innate, and there's one critical concept, free will, actually, that is innate in this criminal responsibility, I guess, when we are talking about the culpability or responsibility, actually. So without free will, is it possible to talk about criminal responsibility?
I don't think so. I think we've had this discussion before.
Yes, that's also right.
But at least in my opinion, I don't think it's possible to have law or responsibility at all if we don't at least assume that people are capable of making free and informed choices. Because otherwise, like, how would we learn from our mistakes if we're predetermined anyways? So the law wouldn't actually have any use, so to say.
And talking about the free will, I think that's also the connecting point which you focused on in your research, because in the determination of criminal responsibility, free will plays a critical role. And now we are also discussing, with the increase in the complexity of the AI technology, whether AI can take this responsibility to determine actually the free will, the role of free will in determining this criminal responsibility. So what role can AI play in this process actually?
I actually don't think that it can replicate free will. I'm mostly basing that on the theory that free will means that you could have chosen differently in a given situation. It's of course debated, as everything in law is, but yeah, that's kind of my basis. And since you have an algorithm that is trained on a given set of data, and yeah, the algorithm is limited in its form, so to say, you can only have like a given output. During criminal procedure, you would kind of try to think backwards how the person arrived at a certain choice or at a certain act. And that is assumed to have been a free choice. And if you have AI that I'm saying cannot make free choices, you can't really reverse engineer this process to arrive back at the question whether the person was free or not. So my idea of how to use AI in criminal proceedings is actually to use it only on those aspects where the person is not presumed to have free will, but to have been inhibited in a way, which is diminished responsibility then, and then to like use these limiting factors within the algorithm or the training data or whatever we enter into it in some kind of prompt, to then let the AI kind of replay the whole situation and maybe tell us if the person was predetermined to a certain degree and maybe even in what degree. Ideally, it would unify like all the disciplines that are usually involved in determination of diminished capacity, like psychology, medicine, some forensics about alcohol maybe, and then also the legal evaluation afterwards due to legal standards, not to psychological standards. Maybe this would kind of bring together the input of all the different disciplines, and without the judge, who is a trained legal scholar, having to understand all of the psychological or medical concepts.
And also in this process, we would also maybe talk about the intentions of the accused person in terms of whether AI is capable of understanding the intentions of the accused person, because intentions are typically factors which were counted in also in the legal code and also by the judge when it's trying to determine what is the extent of this culpability of this person. And right now we are just moving on to another complex theme coming from the legalese, actually, whether AI machines are able to understand the intentions of the persons, because right now we are going a step forward from the cause and effect relationship to the understanding of whether intentions are more than just neuron transmissions.
Well, I think that question has two aspects, and one is if the AI can understand the intention of the person working with it, so it would be the judge. Well, AI doesn't understand. AI analyzes and then predicts. So what it can do, it can take the intention that is maybe transmitted in the way a prompt is written and predict the most likely outcome or answer to that question. So it wouldn't understand the intent of the judge, but it would be able to predict what he wants in a way. The intention of the person involved in a criminal process, on the other hand, that depends on which jurisdiction you are, because in common law, that would be a problem, because there the defense of diminished capacity is a question of intent. In German law, that's a question of guilt. And the question of intent doesn't even factor into it.
Maybe Searle would also agree with your first definition that, okay, what matters is not actually this exchange of neurons, but intention is more of that physical connections or physical interchange of information.
that for sure. Yeah, like the system understands. Like the little factors inside, or the person reading the Chinese manual doesn't understand a thing, but the system understands.
Let's talk about more comparing the human judge with the AI machine actually, and starting with the human judge. What are the current parameters, current criteria in order to determine the criminal responsibility right now? And starting from that point, then we can also talk about how can we transfer these criteria to AI actually.
Yeah, so, well, of course, they're all written down in the German criminal code. But examples are like you're very strongly inebriated, alcohol, drugs, whatever, mental illness that in a moment of the crime inhibits you to form a free choice, some external pressure or something like that that makes it impossible for you to have acted differently, or at least mostly impossible to have acted differently. Anything that after you've acted you would have said that wasn't what I wanted wouldn't have been my choice of action, so to say. So those are legally the factors that are taken into account. Yeah, between the age of 18 and 21. Actually, also the actual person before the judge, if the judge has the impression whether the person is already like adult enough to understand what they're doing and the consequences of that. So yeah, and those would be in a way the same factors that would factor into the algorithm. Of course, to determine all of those factors, you usually have some kind of psychological evaluation, medical evaluation, forensical evaluation, and the judge gets all that, reads all that, or has it presented to him, and then on a legal standard has to determine whether that person was, so to say, free or not. And I think it's a bit difficult to expect a legal scholar to actually appreciate in its full content the psychological or other disciplines and reach like a fair verdict in that regard. So if we would enter all of these factors from the different disciplines without this filter of a legal person looking over it before it is appreciated, I think that would make it a lot more clearer and fairer.
Actually, on that point, we have to also mention that in the courtrooms, judges are normally using a lot of expert opinions when they are deciding on a technical topic. And in this situation, we are also talking about psychology, for example, as a main area, which judge normally cannot really be expert of. And the information that you gave AI seems to have a really great opportunity to decide on these issues, because if we train AI with a lot of data, a lot of maybe legal decisions, it could also decide better from the judge. But I think that also comes with the challenges.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Although I would like to add one more thing.
Sure.
The judge, he has to listen to all these experts, but he doesn't necessarily have to follow them. He can diverge from, for example, psychologists' perspective. Of course, he has to justify that, but it's possible. And if that were like entered kind of unfiltered into the AI evaluation, so to say, I think that would make it less likely. And I think that would be a good thing, because like a purely legal evaluation of that part might be a bit far from reality.
Yeah, sure. And there are also other challenges, like there could be a risk of diminishing or breaching human dignity. Also, maybe right to fair trial. Would you like to elaborate on these risks when we use AI or only AI for this decision-making process?
Well, it's only a small part of the decision-making process. And it's also only a part of it if the defendant claims that he was not fully responsible. Right to fair trial, like I said, I think it would make it a bit more predictable and fairer, so to say, because like all the disciplines would be fully appreciated in all of their expertise. Human dignity, yes. So the human dignity argument in that regard, for me, comes from the fact that because of the innate faculty for free will, we are awarded human dignity. And so to think it backwards, kind of, we have to protect the free will or the capacity for free will to protect human dignity, and not only protect the capacity, but also evaluate it in a more realistic and factual way in regard to the defendants or legal subjects.
Another factor is empathy. I'm not going to ask you about actually whether empathy should play a role in the courtrooms or the technical terms actually, like is AI capable of empathy? Yeah. Because it also requires the extensive definition of empathy itself. But presupposing that AI is not capable of empathy in a common sense. Would that be a problem for the decisions of the AI, or would that be a challenge that can be raised by the accused so that, okay, AI was not capable of empathy, so I need a human judge to decide on that matter?
Well, I think in that regard, it opens up one question that I'm still thinking about, and that is whether the decision of the AI and that idea would be binding or not. Still not sure about that. But empathy in general, I think it's really closely connected to the fact that the judge is a human, that we make law for humans. But on the other hand, I think empathy is a huge bias because we are humans. We can't influence whom we empathize with and whom not. And mostly we don't even notice it. And I don't think that even a long-trained judge can always know whether he just empathized or not, or he feels with someone or not. So I think actually eliminating that to a certain degree, not all of it, because I think it's very valuable when determining sentencing or giving people a second chance. But I think in certain regards, it's actually rather a chance to eliminate that. But yeah, I don't think AI is capable of empathy. I think it's capable of simulating that. And hopefully with training this AI the right way, it would not try to simulate empathy, because that should be an empathy-free process, so to say.
And also the elephant in the room. The last challenge, the black box phenomenon. Actually, when we are trying to talk about AI in a context of social sciences, humanities, or legal context, then this comes out, the black box problem. So we don't know actually how AI comes up to that decision at all. Would it be a problem for the legal situations or in determining the criminal responsibility?
Yeah, well, we could also come back to Turing or Searle for that, or just any person. Everyone is a black box. Even to ourselves, we mostly don't even know ourselves how we arrived at a conclusion. Of course, a judge should know because he writes the judgment, he thinks about it, he has to justify it. That's actually also a fundamental right or a human right to have a justified decision. But to a certain extent, everyone is a black box. Of course, the judgment shows you how the judge reasoned, but it doesn't let you see inside the brain. It doesn't give you, I don't know, just a printout of what happened in the brain. And it's similar with that AI. Maybe in some ways AI would even be capable to show you what it did. I don't know. I think from my point of knowledge or view, I think we would arrive at a similar point with where we can, in an fMRI, for example, see where the brain is active, but we don't know what it translates into, what are the thoughts exactly. We can't produce a film of thoughts or a movie of thoughts, so to say. We just know that this part was active, and I think it's similar with AI. It can show you which part of the code it activated or which code it used to arrive at a certain decision, but I think to a certain degree it still is open for interpretation what this really signifies as meaning or content.
Yeah, sure. And also on the other side of the coin, we see a great potential actually that lies on the use of AI technology in these matters, because considering that or presupposing that AI cannot really be affected by the human errors, human emotions in this decision making, it's also open to questions, surely, but we can also see that there would be more previsible and equal decisions of guilt principle. So what are these potential of the use of AI in this area?
I think you just listed most of them.
I'm really sorry for taking your role.
Yeah, like I said, I don't think we should eliminate the human judge in general, because people, I think, are much more comfortable if they sit face to face with another person. Of course, it's still a super stressful situation if you have to appear before a court, but I think it's much easier to know that there's another human being with, for example, the faculty for empathy. And you see it with a lot of defendants who always want to talk. They always feel like if they just say the right thing, they can convince a judge. And I don't think you would have that with an AI. And even if it's in the setting better to keep quiet, I think this hope or this feeling that, hey, there's a person that I can convince of my view is really important, because the judge's decision should be based on both sides. So, and thinking, hey, he could be convinced, or she, also means that he fully appreciates what I have to say and my point of view, my side, my experience, so to say.
So in that solution proposal, then there will be also human factor at the end of the day to correct the decisions of the AI machine, right? If I interpret it correctly.
I think so, yeah. I think AI should only be used as a tool to facilitate and maybe better in some aspects a decision, but it shouldn't replace the decision. And it also shouldn't replace the collection of evidence and stuff like that, or appreciation of evidence. Yeah. And another advantage of AI would be as a tool, not only in criminal procedure, but we see that courts are a bit overloaded with work, and procedures or processes take forever, which is also not really good for state of rule of law. So I think, I don't know, maybe reading and making resumes of cases, for example, or stuff like that. I think it could make the work of a judge much faster, but only in places where not his real legal appreciation is needed.
In that situation also there lies this problem of when judge actually has to differ from the decision of the AI, he has to justify his decision. And that also creates sometimes, you also mentioned about this overloading of the legal system right now, and it also sometimes pushes judges to confer with the decision of the AI maybe. So
yeah, might be. Yeah, of course we would kind of, or at least be able to trust that the judge at least reads the AI decision and kind of thinks about it. But of course it saves time if he doesn't have to reach the conclusion himself, but he still would have to read, appreciate it. But that brings back the question whether it would be binding on a judge or not. But I think making it binding would be difficult. Yeah, since he's too held to be independent, and I would not be really independent. But yeah, reading something and agreeing with it or disagreeing with it, I think is a shorter period of time than having to justify everything yourself.
Sure. And we can also talk about that project as a really intensive interdisciplinary project, because there should be also AI program, which should be trained with the old legal court decisions and also other factors, psychological factors, in which legal scholars should also play a great role, right? And maybe you can more concretize the role of the legal scholars in that process to direct the efforts of the other scholars coming from the other disciplines.
Well, I think what legal scholars would be useful for is to extract those parts of judgments the AI is trained with that only concern the criminal responsibility, because everything else, I think, would kind of flaw the training data in a way, or influence it at least. And of course, we have these fundamental or human rights standards that they would, I think, try to monitor, so to say.
One other aspect, actually, you also concentrated on this legal language, legalese. And it's maybe impossible for the persons coming from the other disciplines to understand this legal language, which legal scholars are also not really capable of understanding, and sometimes we have to admit that.
Yeah. My course on psycholinguistics, I actually wrote my term paper on the question if eye tracking or something like that could be used to determine how good a witness understands the legal language that is like a second layer in court on the general language that you know, and how difficult or how dangerous it actually is for a witness to incriminate themselves without knowing that language. So yeah.
At least we can function as a translator in that sense. We are not capable of building up these machines, but we can do this translation work maybe.
And of course the evaluation of the results, and then trying to make them better. But yeah.
Sure. And that also brings us to that question of how do we actually use a methodology or a criteria to determine the success of AI machines in terms of determining the correct criminal responsibility level of an individual. So I'm asking this question because there are two different approaches that comes to my mind. The first one is comparing the success of the machine with the human judge. And the second one is putting an ideal standard and also comparing ourselves with that. But both of the approaches have actually their own problems.
Yeah. Well, if we take the comparison with the human judge, I don't think we get anywhere new. We just repeat what is happening and just outsource it. And like the whole idea with this approach or AI in criminal responsibility would be to make it better or safer or fairer or whatever for people involved. So I think it would be more like the standard that you mentioned, and which would like be fair trial and human dignity. However concrete, you still need to formulate that. But how you actually measure that in the moment, not so sure, because of course if you only take legal scholars in the end to appreciate it, same problem. You would also have to take into account the evaluation of the other disciplines, I think, and maybe if they all agree, then it's not really a legal standard in the end anymore. So I'm not really sure. Yeah. Open question. Open questions are good for science.
But it's also fair to say that the most used test, Turing test, is not enough in this process in terms of if an AI software cannot be really differentiated from the real human judge. That's not enough actually in that case, right?
I think that would be the comparison with the human judge, and we don't want the AI to replicate human decisions, or at least I would in that regard wanted to make a specific AI algorithm probability-based decision.
Yeah. And the last topic is the use of AI. Is it also an infringement to the right of demanding a human judge? And in that case, you also refer to the complexities when we only have AI machines in the courtroom. And you also talk about, okay, having a real human judge would be also better for the accused person to explain itself. But should that be infringement in legal terms if we only have, of course, an AI judge?
If you think about it, a human judge is supposed to be independent and he should reach his judgment independently. What you would do with AI, if it took these decisions, you would train it on older cases. And then, for example, for the amount of sentence in a certain crime, I don't know, theft or something like that, what the AI would do is calculate like a mean or a median and then take the sentence from that. But it wouldn't appreciate the person anymore or the special circumstances or the individual circumstances. It would just go from this Gaussian curve or whatever. And that's not an independent decision. That's a probability decision. And the problem with that also is since you feed all of the new judgments into it as well, it just gets like steeper and steeper and just unifies at a certain point. And that's like not what should be happening. Even if like lower courts have to adhere to decisions of higher courts, they still can deviate in certain regards based on the individual in front of them. But I think with AI, we would have this like self-affirming circle, which just would end up with like unified sentencing, for example.
Yeah, thank you so much for this really insightful interview. Actually, we use a lot of legal terms, but try to facilitate for our audience to explain and also elaborate on these legal terms. I hope that also our audience enjoyed this interview. And as a tradition, I'd like to ask you for this occasion 2 fun questions about your background. Actually, the first one is you also studied French law, English law, and also German law. So there are a lot of differences between these laws, I would say. I'm not an expert, but was that a really challenge for you? Did that occur you sometimes that you confused the certain aspects of these different legal systems in your legal training? Or, I mean, how was that process and how did you arrive to that decision to study 3 different law systems?
Actually, my choice of university was kind of influenced by the fact that I could study English law there, like in parallel. Of course, I just wanted to uphold my standard of English and stuff, but I was also really interested. And yeah, the French law, it's just kind of came by opportunity because I wanted to do an Erasmus Plus anyways. And University of Passau is so cool that they have these agreements with other universities that when you study there, like you actually study the full curriculum of the degree. You don't only do your usual Erasmus cherry picking, so to say. So yeah, I was just, if it's possible, why not? And did I confuse them? Not really. It's just if you like speak several languages and sometimes you remember the word only in a different language, that kind of happened to me sometimes between the jurisdictions. Like, I don't know, for a criminal law thing, I would remember some case from England which would solve the problem. But I don't know, or the English definition, but I wouldn't remember the German one.
A provoking follow-up question. Which law system has provided you more challenges in terms of understanding the underlying logic of that system, maybe? Apart from the linguistic differences.
Yeah. Might actually be German law.
I'm not surprised by that answer.
But I think it's mostly because of the methodology and also the structure of the studies is like completely different. Like English and French law is bachelor masters and German law is on the state exam. So you like kind of always learn the same stuff just to a different depth. Mm-hmm. And you always come back to it and build up on that. And in English and French law, you more have like these finished semesters or like close-up semesters. You still take a lot from them, but methodology-wise, it's not as helpful, I'd say.
You are more of a fan of flexibility.
I'm not sure, actually. I think we're a bit too rigid in German law, or at least in German law studies. On the other hand, what I really miss here is the form of exam we had at the University of London, and that was essay writing. That was really cool, and I always got my best grades from them.
Perfectly objective opinion.
Yeah, but in France, they also have like different kinds of exams. They also have like the case solving, but it's really rare there. You have like more like a commentary of a judgment, for example, or also some kind of essay or, yeah.
Yeah, that's fair, actually. And the second fun question is my favorite because as a legal scholar, we are not really confronting with other legal scholars who are really into metal music and performing amateurly or professionally as a singer in metal bands. So what are your next projects or what were your aspiration when you really got into this metal music thing?
Okay. My aspiration when I got into it was to listen to it as much as possible.
Never get enough of it.
Nah, the thing is, I for the singing part, I started out with symphonic metal, like Nightwish with Temptation, like the more operatic soprano. And I trained myself to be really good at that. And at some point I felt like, okay, but I want to be able to do like the other part as well, like the really hard stuff and with the rasp, the grit and everything. And yeah, that's my project right now to kind of teach myself to do that.
Since our episode got out of track right now, I'm just going to ask you to name some of the bands that you really like and recommend to our audience.
Oh wow, that's hard.
Not while they are working, but maybe when they are running or in their free time activities.
So for workout, I recommend Powerwolf, actually, or Sabaton.
How would you rate the toughness of this band out of 10?
They're power metal, so they're actually kind of soft.
Okay, cool.
Kind of.
Everything is, subjective, sure, but, relative.
Give it a listen and don't be too
Just name your top 5 then.
Top 5. Yeah, I think Nightwish and With Them Temptation are up there. Well, it is debatable whether Scorpions is metal, but there are kind of also the basis for metal, but...
I can't believe that was the most challenging question that I asked during this recording.
That's the same as you would ask me, what's your favorite book? Well... Oh my god. Well, actually, my favorite band is not even a metal band. It's a gothic rock band. They're called Asp. Can really recommend them. They have really beautiful lyrics. Hailstorm. They're really cool.
So let's
I like Kiss.
Kiss. That's a classic band.
Yeah. They're more like, I think, on the edges of metal, but not here to judge that.
Let's not go into the definition of a metal band.
Linkin Park, really like Linkin Park.
Oh, that's a surprise for me, because normally the fans of metal bands really hate Linkin Park. I'm not saying that because I was a kid and I...
Sure you don't mean Nickelback?
No, I'm not. I'm really sure, actually. Yeah, but I mean just the two first albums, like Meteora and Hybrid Theory.
Mm-hmm.
But then it just, went downhill.
Yeah, well, I'm not a full-on metalhead. I have to say that as well. I come more from the gothic and black scene, and I listen to a lot of metal as well, and I sing a lot of metal, but not exclusively headbanger.
Thank you, Isabell, for this wonderful recommendations and accepting to be our guest today.
You're welcome. It was fun.
And we are just closing our podcast episode. And if you liked our episode, please don't forget to check out our previous episodes. So Isabell and I are saying goodbye to you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the HGGS podcast series, Sinan. In this series, we bring you conversations with experts from a wide range of disciplines, from the social sciences to the humanities, from law to economics. If you enjoyed our podcast, we invite you to explore our previous episodes and subscribe to our channel so you never miss a new episode. Stay tuned for more insightful interviews coming soon.